Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to start before I go into this topic to review make some remarks of the things I've heard. I've heard, and I really enjoyed Renee the comment on the seller's perspective, the need to want to make revenue, of course. I really enjoyed some of the comments from Eric and the multi-Maxwell pyramids, the parochial view of search. I found that very interesting. Andreas' mention of 0 results, 0 hits is kind of sad. I found that very appealing. And I also enjoyed all the comments about recall not being suited. Andy referring to that result set where you had those women high heels and saying that it was a very desired set of results, and I also enjoy, of course, I missed some of the Zalando talk because I had to sadly deal with a revenue-making call. But I also enjoy very much, I was amazed, such a very good comments from Peter on the need to innovating and to let people go and to have and be creative and with search. Also Diego on the sweet spot between relevancy and business, I find that something that agrees to our constitution. And I'm amazed with Roman, such an authentic guy. You did such a fantastic, open and frank sharing of your experience. So with that, I'm going to talk about search in a particular light. And this is the search in the light of perceptions. Search in the light of emotions, affects, which means emotions and feelings. I will refer to that instinctively, although they are different things. But, basically to try and unravel such a difficult topic, which is at the very edge of what we're doing in empathy. Of course, we do every other thing, but on the new stuff and where we're heading, to try and unravel this, I have 3 questions. 3 questions that hopefully with a little bit of your help we can answer. The first question is, when do we arrive at knowing that search is good? We spoke about this a lot today. When do we arrive at knowing that search is good? And I know good can be many things, which is fantastic, it's great, but the question is, and I try to introduce it quickly, is there only rationale into it? Or do we have to surrender that there is something else to goodness in search that we cannot objectively quantify? Okay, that's an idea to reflect upon. The second question that I have, and I better show you the questions. The second question I have is, okay, if we make an assumption, and I propose to make this assumption and to be open, I'll be touching and I'll be crossing some disciplinary boundaries, which I think is necessary. But that's another question. The second question I have is, let's entertain that search is something that can be felt, that can deliver something else than functioning. Let's just be open to the idea that search can also something that evokes a feeling. And when that person saw those high heels, felt desire, that person saw the bong, his imagination flew, or her. And when we see things, we not only reason those things subjectively, but we go through a combination of thoughts and feelings. And let's entertain that idea, that we can feel emotions through search, which is pointless, unless we try and figure out what types of emotions are those. Which brings us to the third question. And the third question is, how on earth do you productize upon this? Okay, if you agree that search is something that besides the necessary functioning, acquires another kind of advancements and elicits an emotional response, then how are you going to create a product that negotiates this? Okay, which is quite a challenge. So those are the 3 questions I have. And then I have some art. I've taken the liberty to select some pieces that I'm fascinated by. And they have connections to everything I'm talking, but you can ask me later and reach out if you're interested You know, it's great. You can put art, you can put naked bodies, and everything is great. But if everything is connected to each slide, I have a handful of slides anyway. You won't have to see a lot of art. Now, the first question, and this is when you're going to help me a little bit. I did this exercise 4 weeks ago in Cincinnati, and I got the answers that I got. I'll share them with you in a moment. But I just want a word from you. You know, just a word. Just be open. And when somebody tells you, when do you know search is good? And of course, there are many definitions of good. There are many horizons to it. You know, but I just want to know a word. So throw a word. Somebody tell me a word that when you think that search is good. Arne, go for it. Just one term. Great, good one. Come on, throw more. Trust. Wow, great. More on those. Just feel free, shout them. Just surprising, personal, great. You learned something, great. It was helpful and great. So somebody said something else? Inspirational? Correct, very good. Understood, beautiful feeling. Great. So, sorry? Stressless. Yes. Oh, that's great. So, you know, it's at the end of the day, there are many types of knowing, or many ways of knowing that search is good. And we've seen, I believe, 2 gravitational points, and I'll try to group them and show you what we got on this other event. But some people associate that search is good because data said so. Okay? Yeah, that's right. We live in that world. And some other people assume the knowledge of search being good because data said so. But as well, and I think his name was Andy, you put some after reflections. You thought of it, you know. So these are 2 different things, from what data tells literally and what you put as an afterthought and you reflect on it. The moment you reflect on it, you open up to more subjective stuff. And you move away from the objectivity, the performance, the rationale, the specifics, the structure, and you arrive into the realm of reflections which lead you naturally to emotions and feelings. Yeah. So when I was in Cincinnati, I was surprised because I was in Donald Trump's kingdom. This is the answers I got. We're very similar. You see, I was surprised to see the trust and honest in there, and see these ideas that we can try and gravitate on 2 different horizons, you know. Things that are necessary for search to function, and things that are necessary to evoke something else than function. Now the question is that important? And you have to ask this question when you're trying to envision where search is going to go. If you think it's not important, which I believe it is in the world of commerce, then you don't deal with that. But if you think it's important and it makes a difference, and through that you can arrive at that sophistication of panache of search, then you should entertain that, no matter how complex it is. Yeah. So, and it's slippery, of course. But those 2 things is like one point of gravity refers to everything that's to do with how the search works, search itself, and the other point of gravity refers to how people feel towards search. Okay, so it's not one or the other, as we've been hearing today. We have to combine these things, the difference between what people think and what we, the makers of search, think. Now, the second question after this foundational question where we say, okay, let's be open, and for this other question, I'm going to break some of these disciplinary boundaries, you know. I've been doing sadly search for nearly 20 years, and I came to realize, as Eric was mentioning also some of this stuff, that to create something new with search, we need to look beyond search itself. You know, we need to know more than search. And you need to create these multidisciplinary skills that go beyond search, particularly search that is so intimately related to the way people acquire goods with which they define themselves, etc. So if we make this shift from features in search to affects, by that I mean emotions in search, what's the purpose of this? I mean, how on earth are we going to do something with this? Unless we can negotiate these perceptions of search. Unless you can create product around this management of those perceptions of search. And this is extremely, really hard to execute. Now, the key to be able to be successful in the negotiation of the perceptions that search generates, the key to be able to do that is to understand the type and the nature of the things that the people can feel and experience when they go through search. When you start to do that, you truly unlock a world of new innovations and creations for search, as we'll see later. You know. I picked two, and we do this the same way as you have design patterns. We started to document emotional patterns that people can experience when they go through commerce search. And I encourage you to go and create your own. You know, trust this one, or any of the things that you said that were very interesting. And start to shift the mind from, okay, I'm going to have machine learning for this dynamic scoring model, I'm going to have this real-time personalization, I'm going to have that scoring for based on the influence of the social media, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to think, okay, how I'm going to wrap up all those things so I build them as nodes to be able to be directed at evoking a specific effect. Okay, and I picked one for you, two for you, with the time I have, I believe I can go through them. One is joy. Now, what's in a name? And you know, joy can be something that's fun, that's surprising, somebody said, something that's pleasant, something that's warm, something that is connecting, something that pleases you, something that makes you feel in a good, positive way. Okay, there's so many things. I picked the term joy, but you can think of so many. You know. Now I'm going to tap on something that, of course, anything in science has balances on different points of view, which is the way it should be. But let's start with the following idea. You know, when you look at an object, which is a search interface and a search result, you use a different part of the brain to deal with that than when you look at a face. You know, it's different, and it has been recognized as such for the majority and the considered opinion in neuroscience. Now, this is interesting because when you look at an object or a place, objects and places, you use a different part of the brain. But when you look at a face, you use a different kind and different part of the brain that makes you feel at ease, makes you feel better, makes you feel you're expressing, makes you feel you're understanding. And so this is the first consideration to make. There's a lot of work on this and stuff, but I'm super summarizing this. What's really interesting is that we work with a category of objects that are called the grebels. The grebels, basically this category of objects, they are again different opinions, but this category of objects, when you look at them, it knocks on the part of the brain that deals with faces. Okay, especially when you start to add elements of motion and correlated action applied, of course, in harmony. So there is a way to trick the mind, and when you're looking at a device screen, there is a way, which is all the principles of expressive design, to create something on the flat land of the device screen that breaks it and makes it feel joyful, makes it feel pleasant. You know, when you go on your long flights and you see all the people with their iPads touching it, and it's something is doing on the minds. Yeah, so if you add elements of motion, of course, balanced and that are coherent to that type of store and search that you are participating or trying to innovate with, you are able to break the flat land of the device screen. And you are able to open the door to evoke that particular feeling. We started to entertain these ideas years ago, moving from basic instant search to adding elements of motion, moving from simple grids. This is right now in Sarah.com, one of the projects that we do, that you have 3 different types of grids, sometimes 4 different types of grids in the same search session. You know, we present different variations to provoke surprise, to provoke an element of something that's interesting and can maybe be interpreted as joyful and pleasant, and the choices that you make. Depending on the number of results, the precision of your call on your query, you will be seeing different grids. And all those are instruments that are serving on the same purpose, you know. Then again, we use a lot of correlation of motion in here. When we use trends, when we use latest queries, we add elements of motion to the search. Then again, if this particular domain, which is fashion, only show 2 results, which simplifies and brutally maximizes the conventional metrics, let's click through. Then again, doing exercises of adding tags, related tags, next query services that add another element of motion to those interactions. And all those tricks are there to try and evoke that particular feeling of, oh, this was joyful. Okay, which is interesting, depending, as I say, on the specific site and brand. Now, the second effect or emotion that I brought that we experience and work with a lot is, to me, the most important of all. This is why I put this one here for you, because we've been working for many years, as you do, on machine learning or variations, call it whatever you want to call it now, signal processing, trying to build new dynamic models of relevancy. We've been trying to provide tools for merchants so they can control what results go, blah, 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 blah. And we've been doing all that stuff. And we got to a point where we were saying, God, we're doing so much and we're not telling anything to the people who are using the search. And one day you arrive here, if you're using dynamic personalization, and you see some results, and in the evening you come back and you see different results, and suddenly you're searching for coffee in a grocery store, and you see something in there that's a bit creepy because it's based on something that you bought in the store, and all these different things that are happening that we are trying to do because data is telling us that we can improve whatever definition of findability, relevancy, etc., and we add in all these layers of sophistication, but we can create a feeling of something that is not trustful. So how do we do something that evokes a sense of trust in that context? So what we started to do is to tell the user, if this result has been boosted, we tell the user, you know, otherwise they will think, what is that result doing in there, you know? If these are here because they're top sellers or because my wisdom of the crowd model is telling me, tell the user. Tell them why and how this is happening. We call this the Netflix pattern. You know, when they tell you this because you saw that and that because you whatever else. So there, again, in here, what we're trying to do is to evoke a sensation of something that's honest. That's like Roman frank in the way it communicates what it does. Yeah. Also, this that I'm showing you is not live. This is just an experiment that we're doing, that we start to present the personalized sorting as an element of the sorting. So they can choose it or not. You know, for that particular brand, their identity is so crucial that they cannot just present personalization based on signal processing without telling the user, because they are a physical brand, you know. They cannot exist in the digital world only, you know. So with those two, we have many more effects that we work on, and we try to catalog the kind of features that can be orchestrated to be combined to articulate that desired effect. I'm going to move to the third question, which is, you know, given that we can see search in these two lights, in the light of what's important for search itself, which combines relevancy and the business. You can make another fragmentation if you wish, and search from the perspective of the human being who is using the search. How can we redefine the or dearest all problem of search that we can productize upon these ideas that search evokes feelings? Now, the first thing, and this is one of the most important things I could tell, and it's really key that you get, we cannot do this if we don't work on the presentation layer. We cannot do this if we don't productize the UI. You can mass customize it, you can do whatever, but every feature needs to be conceived in the light of how is it going to be seen. If anybody in your team comes and says, I have a new idea to do entity detection, don't tell me the new idea unless you tell me how is it going to be expressed. If somebody says, I have a new scoring model for navigation, Tell me how you're going to present that so we evoke such and such thing that's important for this relationship. Yeah. So if we don't incorporate, and I know this is an ambition that is very difficult to materialize for a lot of the companies in here and the teams, but you need to incorporate within the radar of what search is. You need to incorporate the front, okay? And I'll show you samples of that. This is a toy store where when we work with the search with them, the stuff that they host, we create this solution of search that is also, you can see a layer to it. Now, this layer could drop in any way. This could be smart components that activate separately, but I chose this sample because it's a very good idea, and so seeing this idea that you need to govern and to give an integral identity to both the reasoning of the search and the presentation of the search. And you therefore start to be able to interplay with those visual representations of the functionings, the forms and shapes of search. Yeah. On this other particular sample, OISO, which is why our X is called X team in empathy, won that award. It's, I'm sorry for the resolution of that, but anyway, it's the same idea. You can see that there is a search, and on the event click, we trigger a layer that is provided within the search solution. This is something that the customer hosts. It's not something that is going to be hosted from the outside world. You know. Now, what's beautiful about this, and this is what I'm going to get to right now, is the following. That, well, more samples on that idea that reiterate on that principle of exposing the search. What's beautiful, the presentation of the search, is that once you incorporate into your notion of search the UI, you are able to so fast implement evolutions to that. And as I said before, somebody has a new idea to work on search, you can very quickly act on the representation. Here we use machine learning for color tagging, very basic modeling. And it's not a project that you do and you have to wait for ages to release. Once you have in your search team the ownership of that, you can incorporate those changes in sprint to sprint. Yeah. So now, this is not enough because we started to entertain, and this is the second thing that I hope that you can take with you. Okay, what if rather than creating dashboard, control panels, etc., to control the search, we start to do that in a particular light, which is the light of the presentation. So I give to the merchant or the UX UI merchant not only controls to be able to say, I'm going to boost the product, but to be able to say, I'm going to create a more trustworthy effect to this search, because for this particular category is important, you know. So they say, I'm going to create a more joyful, and they control the elements of the joyfulness that they can trigger from a UI management control. So the motion is something that goes configuratively. The elements of instancy, drop them, keeping them, enabling, disabling on mobile. The helpfulness, which is some of the things that we also mentioned. Therefore, the next queries, related queries, the shift from seeing search from an information system to a communication system that guides me. All those things I can have controls to enable them or disable them, and I can therefore apply my whatever rational traditional metrics to those realizations. We also entertain the idea of trust, trustworthiness, we call that, or truthfulness, being able to say, okay, just through a control, I'm going to start to give on my classic basic functionality of history of queries, and X to be able to delete them, controls to the user to manage that, and rather than doing that programmatically, doing that as a configuration setting. Or we saw before, I want to provide why. I want to tell my user why they're seeing what they're seeing, which is if I am boosting a product, I'm just going to tell them, which I don't know if that's showing. Yes. So just through a control, I start to expose the reasoning behind, which keeps on unfolding in there. But I want to move faster because I'm just hoping to go to this point and hopefully save some time for questions, because each of these areas is very profound, and I just want to move to conclude and summarize. The first observation that I like to make is that I really agree, and I strongly advise this guy, Antonio Damasio. It's a fantastic Portuguese neuroscientist. And he says that for an innovation to succeed, and call it an innovation, a technology, a new product, whatever, it has to stick and to work. And to work, it has to feel. You know, is there something else, therefore, to our search than functioning? Do we have to aspire to that additional realization of a positive feeling? Of course, you all know Seth Godin. He has a lot of work on this, on decoding art, but he says, and I strongly advise his observations and very interesting counterintuitive thinking. He says that a tool has to sophisticate, and tools, when they sophisticate, they acquire that additional, that panache, that level that is something that evokes feelings, something that is what we can obtain when we experience things that we relate to beyond, of course, the necessary functioning. The functioning is essential. And of course, just to finalize a note in there, and I know Philip Pullman is a novelist and stuff, but I like what he says, that nothing that is absolutely irresistible, and I believe that should be our aspiration to search, it can be purely, exclusively reasoned. We cannot depend entirely on the source of what data tells. We need to use our infinite imagination to create something that are extraordinary, you know. And I know this is a lot easier said than done. It goes really nice and easy when you talk to a CEO, and a CEO who is creating a company, and they tell you, you share these ideas and they love it. But when you talk to other people in the company that you have to be a bit more irrational and create more free thinking, it might be more difficult. Now, those are the three questions. Let's be open and understand that we need to look outside search to create new things for search. And break some disciplinary boundaries, fine. You know, we love information retrieval, we love computer science, but perhaps it's not enough, and we have to look elsewhere. Second question, if search evokes a feeling, let's try to exercise the difficult task of trying to catalog those different feelings that search can evoke, you know, and map them to representations of functions that combine evoke that. And thirdly, you know, we are engineers, and we need to productize upon this, which requires to understand those, but also to try and provide tools that help other people to manage those. Yeah, and with that, I say thank you so much.
Thank you for a very inspirational talk. I have actually two questions. The first one is thinking about this kind of UX feeling kind of part of the search. Do you think this is something? I think it triggered me when you had this in the last slide, the second quote. Do you think it's a feature you can add on top when you have reached a level of all those, you know, rational things? So basically, I'm saying, do you think you can use it if your search is not working really well on the factual level, or do you think even then we would benefit from using the emotional level of search, you said?
I say it depends so specifically on your challenges and your brand and, you know, the pressure that you have to deliver and what are you competing against. Ideally, as with everything, we need to not think linearly and causally, and we need to think at least in a twofold way. But that requires such a revisiting of so many mindsets that we inevitably fall in organizations that require one thing after another. You know, I'd say that in the long run, I will work on the culture of my team to be able to rethink search while we continue doing things the way they are. But at the end of the day, you need to work on the culture of the team to have this sensitivity for this, because otherwise it's just not gonna propagate. It's a different view to search, and even if you try to solve short-term problems, the cultural mindset needs to be reset and reconsidered. We went to whatever studies you did, and we were told that search is an information system, and you know, it deals with a lot more than that. So to arrive at that twofold, essentially threefold, blissfully view of search, it's a cultural view, and perhaps you can hack some things by doing some small things in the company that start to awake people's minds while you continue to evolve in your rational problems or challenges of search. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angel, for the talk. Coming to the aspect of trust, as I have experienced a lot of research, UX research as well, where a lot of problem or a huge problem always popped up recurrently, which is the kind of the selection risk, especially in e-commerce search products, so that people are afraid that they haven't seen everything, or the search technology actually haven't delivered everything that's relevant to them. Have you coped with that concept or challenge in particular, and have you found any concepts to counter that intuition of the users?
We did, but it didn't propagate. An experiment, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years ago, using the fisheye pattern. So basically, for desktop only, you were searching and you could get 150 results per row. This was clothing, and we had them all condensed as if they were in hangers. And when you pass the mouse over, so you were searching for hats, and you could see pretty much everything. And then in just a few seconds, you could fly through everything. You know. So once we had that, trying to tackle that effect, and we thought of that idea, but for whatever reasons, it didn't continue. But it's a very interesting challenge, yeah. Yeah.
I think we've got time for another question. I'm going to randomly pick, I'm sorry.
Great, that was a really fascinating talk. And actually, so if I go back to your initial list, I would add one to it. I took part. And that's actually something I wanted to ask about, is that do you have any suggestions or recommendations for how you do this this change in attitude, sort of workshop approaches, or how do you go about shifting attitude?
I don't know, Peter. I don't know. It is so easy with people who already understand and they have a sensitivity for things. It's so easy, and it makes so much sense, and people get it. You know, it's very easier with younger people. This is why we work with uni and stuff. You know, but some people don't appreciate that engineering has to have a quality that goes beyond the necessary functioning, which is a perfectly valid view. And for those people, I became skeptical to try and make them believe that there is another way. I hope that sums up. But quickly, that last question. Yes.
Thank you so much for taking that question. So I have a quick one, is that because all of what you spoke about is about, certainly about relevance, but from the emotional aspect. And I see that I'm seeing so many talks on in buzzwords and today that we have some stats, some formulas, some algorithms to measure the relevance in general. But how exactly, or your suggestion to measure emotional relevance, like which you spoke about?
Yeah, very good question. We can't ever measure such thing, and it's great. It's just fine. It's just fine. And you know, the way we know things, not just search, the way we know anything is always an approximation. I don't know, somebody fooled us that you can know and have the absolute realization, the epiphany to know something with absolute certainty. I'm sorry, there isn't such a thing as absolute certainty for anything. You will be fooling yourself, you know. And a lot less in the realm of emotions, you know. We don't understand the human mind, and that will require that, which is just beautiful. It's just great, you know. Great. Thank you. Thank you.